How do commercial growers of Cymbidiums repot their orchids? Here's one that we're going to show you exactly all of the steps that they take to repot their Cymbidiums. Slightly different to what we do as home growers, but still extremely effective, obviously, because they're growing to resell. Here we have this Cymbidium that could be looking in better order, but we can tell it's basically outgrown its pot. And there's a few things that we need to look at. Let's get straight into it. One of the reasons that we're doing this Cymbidium today is because it's not that happy. There's no real new growth happening from it. It hasn't shown any sign of flower spikes coming, but more importantly, we've noticed a little bit of rot happening in some of these older pseudobulbs, and even some of that new growth has rotten off. So we need to get in immediately. This time it doesn't matter what time of year it is. When we start seeing something like this happening to our Cymbidiums, it's time to repot immediately, because we don't want that spreading throughout our entire plant, which will happen. We've got these two pseudobulbs here that are soft, squishy and leaking goo, which is going to infect everything else. Let's open this out and show you how we would go about repotting this if we were a commercial grower. First of all, it's loosening from the pot, and of course then just removing it. That's always the easiest step, or well, sometimes the easiest step. We can see all of this root growth around the outer edge, as generally happens when you don't repot your Cymbidiums early enough. They have quite a vigorous root system and will fill up your pot and make it difficult to get into. But here, even though these roots are looking good, we feel them and they're mushy. Even if they were all viable roots, which there are some ones in here that are firm and viable, it doesn't matter. The way that this repotting is done really makes no difference. Invariably, this would be done immediately after flowering. So in that early spring period is when you'd be doing this sort of repotting. What you're basically looking for is where the plant would separate itself naturally. And with this specific orchid, the way that these pseudobulbs have overgrown each other, we are going to have to separate this into smaller pieces than we would have liked. Because as a commercial grower, what they would want to do is separate at least 4 pseudobulbs, and that's talking about these nice green pseudobulbs. You want 4 of them at least to ensure that you're going to get flowering in the next season. As soon as you start dividing it off 2 pseudobulbs, or possibly even 1, if you're taking off only 1, then you're probably looking at least 5 years before reflowering. If you're taking off 2, you're probably looking at 2 or 3 years before reflowering. So yeah, they really want as many of those fresh pseudobulbs as possible to ensure that they'll get flowers in the following year. What we do is we jump into the kitchen, get our trusty knives, see where it's going to break off independently, and where the rhizomes join the pseudobulbs, get your knife in there and just cut it straight off, cutting all the way through your Cymbidium, just like that. Seems like a very dramatic way to do it, but that's how it gets done. Yeah, we have this section where those rotten pseudobulbs are, so we've got to sterilize our knife again. If you have a butane gas blower, flamethrower, whatever you need, that would always be the best bet to ensure that no viruses or anything else. If not, just use some isopropyl alcohol. Some methylated spirits also works really well. Just sanitize that knife, making sure you're not spreading any bacteria or fungal spores around. Go in there again to where that rhizome is. And cut that off. Here we have a bitsy little piece, and those rotten pseudobulbs. We'll clean that up just now. And here's our big piece of plant that we have left. And this one's all still integrated as one single plant. but we do have quite a large volume of back bulbs. So what would invariably happen at this point is we don't want this many back bulbs for the amount of fresh new growth. So we're going to want to divide that a bit further. Getting in and just removing it. And lucky we did, there's another pseudobulb stuck in the bottom that's rotten, and we can see all that fungal growth on it. So just as well that we had to have that removed. Now we can see that these pieces can just sometimes fall apart because the adjoining rhizomes may have already been cut and they were just overgrowing the top of each other. And so basically here we have our pieces of Cymbidium left over. Let's just move these all out of the way and show you what happens next. Again, with our trusty knife, what we're going to do is go in through here and cut out all this old root volume. Whether there's viable roots in there or not, a lot of those roots will have come from the other part of the plant as they grow in and mix around each other, and from this old pseudobulb. This old pseudobulb's roots have done their job already. This pseudobulb is plump and full and will help feed the other parts of the plant. So it doesn't have any need for those roots any longer. Those roots may just rot further and cause problems later. So what we want to go in and do almost a round or crescent sort of cut in through all of that excess root volume. And just clean up some of those outer roots. There we go. And there we only have the roots left that are from the newer pseudobulbs, and that's what we want. We don't need any root volume from this old pseudobulb, so we can just clean any of that off. Just clean up the plant, allow for some air movement, ensure that there's no insects or fungal spores in between those leaves. You may want to give this a little bit of a treatment just to ensure that whatever was causing the rot doesn't spread any further. Just checking for what parts of the root are still viable, not too damaged. Removing those. And there we go. Very little root growth left, but we don't have to worry because as spring comes around, these root incredibly quickly. But we'll explain more on that as we've cleaned up everything and get ready to repot them. There we go with those old pseudobulbs that have all gone all mushy and that new squishy one. You can just peel those away and take off any of that dead material. Now a small little piece like this is, oh, this is why you have to be careful. We have all these small little growthlets here, these little buds coming up around the base of it that I've now very cleverly gone and broken one of them off. So always be careful when pulling away these old leaf sheaths. There's another little one there. But like I was saying, this is going to take between 5 and 7 years before we get any flowers from it. So this isn't an ideal situation, but not much we could have done at this point with this one. Now, with this having been directly attached to those rotten pseudobulbs, this is going to get not only a treatment with hydrogen peroxide, but then again a systemic fungicide that we're going to treat this with before repotting. I'm going to allow this to dry out overnight, and then probably late tomorrow afternoon is when I will repot it. There we go, those old pseudobulbs, just pull them off. And again, with your knife, do that sort of crescent cut, removing all that root volume away. Now, if you're diligent with your Cymbidiums and don't leave it too long to repot like this is, your root volume will be easier to work with. It will be more manageable. Okay, so with this one, we have one back bulb, and this is also considered a back bulb now. These leaves are actually really finished, so they're going to die off this winter anyway, and we have no new growth happening around it. So this again is going to have to be carefully treated with a fungicide and a bactericide, left to dry before repotting. What I'm going to do with this one is just remove all the root volume. There's no point in having any of these roots available on these plants. It's not doing anything good for the plant itself. It's just basically 2 storage units left that we have to coax into forcing out some new shoots out of that one. Also, one of the reasons that we remove all of these old leaf sheaths from around your pseudobulbs is to allow for photosynthesis to happen. We can see that they are green, so that means there's chlorophyll there, and they can continue to photosynthesize, producing food for the plant. Nothing viable down there either, so you can use your secateurs or just get in with that knife. This old pseudobulb here I can see is only going to be problematic, so we may as well just have that removed, and we can use that for back propagation. And often when working with pieces of Cymbidium like this, the commercial growers often don't allow their plants to get these sort of rots onto them, so they often don't cover up or seal these open wounds. But here, because we've had that little bit of rot, we're going to seal this wound with a bit of cinnamon just to ensure that we don't get any further ingress of that rot. I thought we were going to get some bigger pieces out of this, so I brought bigger pots, but we're not, so we're going to stay with the small ones. We'll get our mix ready. This is 1 part silica sand, but always be careful when getting hold of silica sand. You don't want acid washed silica sand. You want as natural as possible, because the acid washed silica sand can break down the surface silica to it, and what will then cause is for those silica particles to connect to each other, cause silica bridges, and then what you land up with is that whole mass of the silica sand that you use starts binding itself together, causing problems in your mix. It can almost form like a hard concrete type of thing, but as long as you're just using a natural silica sand, this is one of the ones used for pool filters, which hasn't been acid washed, and it's got a nice open texture to it, going to allow for good drainage. And then again, that pine bark powder that most places just throw away, but I use it in my terrestrial orchid mixes. It helps with that silica sand, which has a neutral pH. The pine bark is going to give it an acid pH, so that's going to help bring the pH into the ideal range for your Cymbidium orchids, which is between 5.5 and 6.5. And then some potting soil and kraal manure, which is actually decomposed cow manure. There's probably also sheep and other animal litter in it, but it's all been well composted. So it's one part of each. And this is to emulate what a lot of those commercial growers use. They'll use peat. So this pine bark basically emulates what peat is going to do, because peat is not necessarily the most sustainable product. It's causing big problems with the amount of peat that's being removed from the natural environment. So it's not necessarily the most eco-friendly. So we use the pine bark shavings or litter as a replacement for the peat. The coir peat I haven't found has worked quite as well. It can at times seem to provide too much salt content to my media, even after soaking and rinsing. So we've gone with this pine bark shavings to replace it. Also, we find we don't need to add perlite to our mix, which is quite often used to add to those peat mixes, especially because peat, once it starts to dry out, becomes hydrophobic. And then it's very difficult to get it moist again. So they add the perlite in to allow for for the easy absorption of water, which will then slowly bleed out into the peat around it as well. There's now our mix. One part of each, so basically 1/4 of each ingredient. And now that we've got our mix ready, we need to choose our pots for our pieces. So what we're doing here is we're choosing the very smallest pot possible that we can fit our orchid into. It is going to make it a bit of a problematic. They're going to fall over easily, but you're just going to have to find a way to prop them up, because this is the way they're going to root faster. They tend to root into smaller pots more quickly than they do in the larger pots. Probably got something to do with the amount of moisture that's available. There's probably a little bit less. This dries out quicker, so the plant then has to force its way to produce more roots faster. And then once your plant has started to grow again, it will probably take about 2 to 3 weeks before it starts producing roots in springtime. And then even by late summer, you may want to repot them up into the next size pot that is more suitable for the plant, because a plant this small probably isn't going to produce flowers this year, but probably only the following year. So it's going to take about 2 years. Also, don't go compacting the media in. You just want to bounce it in softly to allow it to settle in and around the plant, but don't compact it in, because then you're going to be holding too much moisture again and start causing problems. Also, we don't feed our Cymbidiums that have been divided like this for 2 months. We really want the plant then to go into that little bit of, I need to look for nutrient mode and send out roots. There's plenty of nutrients in that compost or that manure that we've added to the mix. So no extra feed is going to be added to it. It has to find those nutrients through producing roots. That's the only way we're going to get a successful plant in the end, and that's why we don't feed it for those 2 months after this repotting. It can be watered in immediately after this repotting to settle in that media in and around the plant better, and then we don't water it until it starts to really dry out. We don't want it to dry out completely because we still want those roots to be absorbing enough water to keep the plant healthy, but we make sure we put it on the drier side. We make sure the media is just moist. We don't want to give it too much water that it doesn't want to grow a lot of roots. We want to just give it enough water to keep it happy and to make it wanting more, so that it will produce more roots. So there we go. All we're doing is filling in our media in and around the Cymbidium. Just removing some of the excess media so that we don't cover up the pseudobulbs too far, but still giving it enough depth that it's not going to fall over. This one I would have put in a smaller pot if I had, but this will have to do for now. And that's basically the way that it's done. A nice sharp knife and lots of removal. We don't really have to do any removal of excess leaf volume with Cymbidiums because of the size of a lot of these bulbs. There's enough energy in them to keep those leaves alive for long enough, and the leaves are doing all that photosynthesis, all that work of producing food to help feed the plant so it can help produce those roots. They're actually extremely tough, hardy plants that really don't need to be babied too much. We do have other Cymbidium repotting videos available. We'll drop them in the description box down below for you to go check them out too. And those are using different media, different mixes to pot them into, because not everyone is able to grow their Cymbidiums the same way, and the different medias give you a choice on how you are able to look after your Cymbidiums. Whether you're a heavy waterer, whether you have lots of rain, whether you've got cool temperatures, all of these things factor into your decisions for the different media that you use. For high intensity growth and care as what commercial growers give to their plants, then this sort of media is ideal. But not everyone is able to handle their orchids to that degree of precision. But this still can be a good all-round mix. And if you have any further orchid related questions, drop them in the comments box below and we'll be sure to get back to you. Or pop down, have a look at that Buy Me a Coffee link. There's a lot of free information there available for everyone. Ed posts new orchid related content there all the time. So don't be shy, go down there, have a look. And if you feel like it, sign up, become a member, and grow like a pro. And thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.